Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Behind the Why channel. Today, we're diving into the U.S. National Guard, a unique military force with a long history, playing a critical role during America's moments of crisis. In this video, we'll analyze the deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles in 2025 under President Donald Trump and what it reveals about his approach to governing the United States. Let's get started with Mr. Know-It-All. What does the U.S. National Guard do? The National Guard is a joint activity of the United States Department of Defense, DoD, comprising reserve components of the U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force, the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard, respectively. Colonial militias were established during British colonization of the Americas from the 17th century onward. The first colony-wide militia was formed by Massachusetts in 1636 by merging smaller, older local units, and some National Guard units trace their origins to this militia. Various colonial militias became state militias when the United States gained independence. The term National Guard was first used by some New York State militia units in 1824, named after the French National Guard to honor the Marquis de Lafayette. National Guard became the standard nationwide militia designation in 1903 and has referred to reserve forces under joint state and federal control since 1933. According to the Defense Manpower Data Center, as of 2023, approximately 419,000 reservists serve in the National Guard. In 2017, about 9,500 were stationed in U.S. overseas territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Virgin Islands. The National Guard undertakes a variety of missions. Its primary role is supporting disaster response. Most recently, the Guard was mobilized to address devastating wildfires in California in January 2025. In 2005, following Hurricane Katrina's landfall, over 50,000 National Guard troops were deployed to assist with evacuations, rescues, and restoring order in New Orleans. The National Guard is also activated to ensure homeland security. During the January 6, 2021, Capitol riot, over 25,000 Guard troops were ordered to maintain order in Washington, D.C. Additionally, the National Guard can participate in overseas military operations, including the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In principle, any U.S. citizen meeting physical, mental, and legal standards can join the National Guard. Most members serve part-time, though a small number serve full-time. Veterans who have completed service in the regular U.S. Armed Forces can enlist in the National Guard, typically without requiring additional training. Civilians with no prior military experience can also enlist directly but must complete required training programs. National Guard members serve 1 weekend per month and 2 weeks per year. Their pay ranges from $200 to $600 for a weekend drill, depending on rank. Guardsmen also receive allowances for food and housing, educational assistance, health insurance, and retirement benefits for long-term service. A history of National Guard deployments. The National Guard has been mobilized during several pivotal moments in U.S. history. 1957, President Dwight Eisenhower deployed the National Guard to protect black students during school desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas, overriding resistance from the state governor. 1992, following the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles, President George H.W. Bush, at the request of California's governor, deployed over 10,000 National Guard troops and 2,000 federal troops to quell the unrest, which resulted in over 60 deaths and more than $1 billion in damages. 2020, during the protests following George Floyd's death, Trump urged governors to deploy the National Guard in multiple states but refrain from federalizing it without gubernatorial consent. Typically, National Guard mobilization requires the consent of the state governor. However, in rare cases, the president can bypass the governor using federal authority, such as the Insurrection Act or Section 12406, Title 10 of the U.S. Code. The 2025 Los Angeles riots and National Guard deployment. On June 7, 2025, President Donald Trump signed a presidential memorandum deploying 2,000 California National Guard troops to Los Angeles to address protests sparked by immigration raids conducted by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. By June 10, an additional 2,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines were mobilized, bringing the total force to approximately 4,800. Notably, Trump did not invoke the Insurrection Act but relied on Section 12406, which allows federalization of the National Guard without the approval of California Governor Gavin Newsom. This marked the first time since 1965 that a president took such action without a governor's request. The protests began on June 6, 2025, in the Paramount area and downtown Los Angeles, following ICE raids targeting undocumented immigrants. Protesters clashed with police, set vehicles on fire, and blocked roads, leading to over 150 arrests. Trump labeled the protesters insurgents and declared on Truth Social that he would send in the troops to restore order. Los Angeles's response and legal implications. The response in Los Angeles was intense. Governor Gavin Newsom called the deployment illegal and deliberately provocative, announcing that California would sue the Trump administration. He argued that local forces were capable of managing the situation and accused Trump of staging a political spectacle to bolster his tough image. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass described the deployment as an escalation of chaos, suggesting that LA was being used as a testing ground for Trump's immigration policies. Legal experts, such as Elizabeth Goitian from the Brennan Center for Justice, warned that the deployment was unprecedented and potentially violated the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits federal military forces from engaging in civilian law enforcement. The mobilization of Marines from Camp Pendleton further raised concerns about abuse of power. Key differences. First, we must consider the context and primary purpose of the National Guard deployments. The 1957 deployment was tied to civil rights, while those in 1992 and 2020 addressed large-scale civil unrest. The 2025 deployment was uniquely linked to immigration policy, a divisive issue, and was more proactive than a reaction to widespread violence. Second, regarding the legal basis and authority, the 2025 National Guard deployment stands out for bypassing state authority without invoking the Insurrection Act, unlike the cooperative federal-state model in 1992 and 2020. Similar to 1957, it involved a federal override, but the context, immigration enforcement versus civil rights, was markedly different. Third, in terms of scale and composition, the 2025 deployment was smaller than those in 1992 and 2020 but distinctive for its use of Marines, raising concerns about militarization. The 1957 deployment was smaller and focused on a specific institution. Fourth, regarding political and social implications. 1957, the deployment was a milestone in the civil rights movement, reinforcing federal commitment to racial integration but deepening racial and regional tensions. 1992, the riots and subsequent deployment highlighted racial inequities and police brutality, sparking national debates on systemic reform, though policy outcomes were limited. 2020, the deployments fueled discussions on police reform and racial justice, with Trump's rhetoric polarizing public opinion. The decentralized approach avoided federal overreach but strained federal-state relations. 2025, Trump's unilateral deployment intensified political polarization, with Governor Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass accusing him of provocation. Legal challenges, including lawsuits from California, and warnings from groups like the American Civil Liberties Union (ACLU), underscored risks to civil liberties. The deployment was seen as a test of Trump's immigration agenda and federal authority in Democratic-controlled states. The primary difference in the 2025 deployment lies in its highly political nature, driven by its focus on immigration and unilateral approach, in contrast to the civil rights goals of 1957 and the public safety objectives of 1992 and 2020. It risks escalating tensions in ways not seen in prior cases. The 2025 National Guard deployment in Los Angeles is notable for its immigration-related context, unilateral federalization, and use of Marines, differing from the civil rights enforcement of 1957, riot control of 1992, and decentralized response to protests in 2020. While all addressed crises, the legal and political implications of 2025 suggest a shift toward centralized executive power, raising concerns about civil liberties and federal-state dynamics. The significance of Trump's actions and his approach to governing. Trump's deployment of the National Guard and Marines without local approval reflects a hardline, law and order approach. According to sources like the New York Times and the Washington Post, this move aligns with Trump's broader strategy to expand presidential power. By bypassing the state governor, Trump is testing the limits of federal authority, particularly in Democratic-controlled states like California. Advance his immigration agenda. The ICE raids and military deployment signal Trump's commitment to fulfilling his promise of the largest deportation operation in history. Fuel political conflict. Analysts, such as Eli Stokols from Politico, suggest that Trump is deliberately escalating tensions to strengthen his image among supporters while undermining political rivals like Newsom. However, this approach has raised concerns. Organizations like ACLU and the Center for American Progress warn that militarizing protests could escalate violence, instill fear in immigrant communities, and erode First Amendment protections for free speech. The U.S. National Guard is a vital force, but its use in situations like the 2025 Los Angeles protests highlights the deep polarization in American politics. Trump's actions not only reflect his stringent immigration policies but also raise questions about the balance between security and authority. What do you think about this? Is this an effective way to resolve conflict, or does it make things worse? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Mr. Know-It-All for more in-depth analyses.